Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna shut up too.
Okay.
I don't know if they can hear us online. Check it out.
That's a good question. All right, I think we're about ready to go. Can you guys hear us that are online?
We can.
All right, so I went ahead and redid, like kind of updated the board binders. These are kind of free, all of you guys, except Barbara, she was one as a director back in the day. But this is just kind of a handy notebook for you guys to have that has all of the board meeting handbooks, public meeting law, seeing all of I guess I'm just gonna go from the beginning. So your first page will be dictionary of library terms, just some of the things that we use in the libraries to describe different things that parts of the individual libraries, parts of different terms for different vendors that ESO uses. That's your first, that's section 1. Section 2 is a copy of the master plan. So that's something that you guys will all need to familiarize yourself with. Section 3 is going to be the bylaws. Also, these are all appointed and approved by the board of commissioners. So there's those. 4 is going to be your public meeting law notes. This comes from the League of Oregon Cities, pulled directly from their site. So that kind of goes through everything as far as us having these public meetings. And this is for any public meeting in the state of Oregon. It's all the same regulations. The next one, tab 5, is a handbook on public library board public library board members in Oregon. And this is written for individual library boards. So there might be some things in there that aren't relevant for this group. And it's pretty obvious in there what those are, but that kind of gives you an overview of like just a general library board. They don't unfortunately make one for us county boards because there's only so many of us county boards in the state. So that's just something for you to look over. Tab 6 is a generalized list of the duties of the ESO office and all of the what each of the staff do it at the in the ESO office. So that kind of gives you a breakdown of those tasks. 7 will be the current budget. So this is the one that was just approved in June, well, for July 1st, by the VOC that you guys all looked over. So that's in there for you. Tab 8 is going to be the current year's distribution formula. So this is also what started for the 2027 fiscal year. So it started in July. Tab 9 is where you can put all of your packets for your meetings. So today's is in there. It's a very short one because it's just a training. Mainly I wanted to get you guys this packet so that you had instead of just me sending them through email, the master plan, the bylaws, and then all of the state regulations for boards. And then 10 is the actual approved contract for library services that all of the cities have to sign. Basically just stating the regulations of what the cities are responsible for when it comes to the budget, because our money comes from the county and not from the individual cities. So that's just the guidelines that the cities have to follow in regards to the funds received by the county to the libraries. And it also has the current distribution formula is part of that as well. And then tabs 11 and 12 are blank. So if you ever have anything you want to add into it, that's where that will go. Any questions on any of that?
I don't know everybody.
Okay, oh, that's probably a good way for us to start. So I'll have you start, Haley.
I'm Haley Lagacy, and I am the director here at the North Bend Library.
And I'm Stacy Nix. I'm the administrator for the Extended Services Office.
Kathy Larkham Johnston, I'm seat 6, small libraries plus Dora.
Barbara Cappy, seat 5, Small Cities Inventory Corporation, and I'm actually from Middle Point.
And I'm Margaret James from, I'm seat 3 on the North Bend.
I'm Kurt Benward. I'm Coos Bay inside.
I'm sorry,
Coos Bay, Kurt Benward.
Kurt?
Kurt, yeah.
I'm John Souter. I will hopefully soon be seat number 2, Coos Bay outside of the city limits, or SD9, School District 9 outside of the Coos Bay city limits.
And I'm Sandy Stauffer from Powers, and I'm the small libraries representative for mostly rural. I'm the one person who is the Coos County Commissioners interviewed and selected for this particular representation for rural, very small libraries, which is, and I've gone to all of them, by the way, I'm representing, so just trying to do a good job of giving you some perspective about what small libraries are facing right now, particularly Dora and Powers.
Yep. And then on the computer, it looks like we have, we'll start with Sammy.
Hi, Sammy Pearson, Coos Bay Public Library Director.
Joni.
Joni Bedwell, Powers Public Library Director.
Cheryl Young, Lakeside Public Library Director.
And Teresa.
Teresa Lucas, Cook Hill Public Library Director.
All right, I think that's all of us that are here today.
Are we missing?
We are. So Patrick is the seat for North Bend unincorporated. So yeah, Patrick Franks.
Is he a new member?
He is not. He joined last year.
Are we the only 2 new members?
Nope, and then Margalie also. So yeah.
How do you spell your name? Margallede. The last name is James. Okay.
And then John, hopefully we'll have your approval done here soon. I think you're at Haley. You have to go to Haley's.
Yes, and it is on our council agenda for their next meeting.
Perfect. And then once that happens, we'll get you over to the BOC so that they can give their final stamp of approval. And then it'll be official.
Stacy?
Yes.
One suggestion maybe for the notebooks, if we update them.
Yeah.
Would be the members, the names of all the members of the board, and maybe when the term expires.
Good thing to add. Okay.
And contact information.
Yes. Okay. So directory. I can do that. Maybe a
Which
little bit.
is on the website.
It is on the cooslibraries.org website. We
Not
keep,
complete right at the moment, but
I think we just updated it. I have, somebody that's handling a lot of our website stuff for me now, so it gets updated a little bit quicker. I think the only seat that's not official is, John's so far, but I will make a note.
Was also not.
Yeah, right. Okay, so, okay. Any other questions about the handbook? Anything that anybody wants to go more in depth look at? Yeah.
State reports, state library.
Yeah.
Does the library service district do a report to the state
So
library?
we do, and I used to do one that was the exact same as all the libraries, but about I think it's been about 4 years now, the state changed the way that the county library the service district ones. So because there's only a few of us. So us, Lincoln City, Washington County, I think. There's just a few. So they kind of revamped the way those county reports were done. And so I do turn it in. It's mainly just my budget. That's pretty much all that I have to report to the state for the county is the budget. I think. I just turned it in and I'm trying to think of what else is on there. But so it used to have to be all the statistics for check-ins, check-outs, all that's reported to the state. But because our offices are so small and we're not library based, we don't have patrons that come in and visit and all that. So a lot of our part of the report was just zeros.
And so where are the kind of outcomes or accomplishments for the LSD part separate from the library part reported?
So yeah, through the board reports that I give you guys. And then, yeah, I mean, kind of the library the ESO's job or ESO's function mainly is to support all of the libraries equally. So anything that's paid for out of the ESO budget is, instead of it being broken down by a distribution formula based on population and circulation and all that, anything that's paid out of the ESO office, all 8 libraries get an 1/8 of what's paid for, if that makes sense. So it's equally shared across. So like digital library, Powers and Dora get the same access to the digital library as North Bend and Coos Bay. IT services, courier service, ILL services, outreach, any of the databases. So I will give you, when I give out the packets for each of our board meetings, there will be a digital comparison page that will be anything that's like digital related, any databases and all that, and it'll give a breakdown of cost per serve, or cost per patron, cost per use. And then I'll go through the current month's budget review of what's been spent and where we're at in the budget as compared to where we're at in the year. But yeah, it mainly will just come in those packets. And if you guys have any other questions at any time, then just let me know and I can get you the information.
And one more, is there an annual schedule of meetings?
We try to meet quarterly. We do have one that we haven't really followed in a while. That just kind of gives, it's a month-to-month breakdown, or I guess it's a quarterly breakdown of what happens inside each of the quarters as far as the board goes. And that's something that I will also add to this, so that you guys have that too. And it's kind of like, January through March, this is what happens. Our next meeting, official meeting though, will be in, hold on a second, I forgot to start hitting record, so we're gonna record now. Maybe. So our next official meeting will be in November, and that's when we do like the elections and everything for our chair and co-chair seats. And then we'll kind of ESO will give an update on where we're at. Each of the libraries will give you guys an update on things that they have going on. But yeah, so November. And Sandra, you have?
I have remarks I want to make. I'm just not sure when, regarding the funding formula and just.
Oh, I'm actually gonna be going over the formula overview here. As soon as we're done with this, if everybody's done with this, we can jump into that.
And Sandra, and I'm sure other board members have thoughts and opinions and things that they want to share about the distribution of funds in the district. But I think it's important to clarify that the purpose of today is a training. And Oregon public meeting laws state that you cannot have discussion pursuant to a decision outside of a formal official meeting. And so if today there were things that you wanted to share but that might weigh upon a future decision, like how much funding is allocated from library to library. The board is advised to not discuss those things today because this is not a board meeting. So I understand, and I think that that's valid and important, and that you have the opportunity to do that at a meeting, but this is a training. And so we want to be mindful of what the requirements of the Oregon public meeting laws are. We can answer questions about how the decision was come to with the current formula, the rationale behind the different elements. But if it moves into a discussion of whether or not that is a valid method, that method should remain in place, those are things that would weigh on a future decision. And so the board should try to avoid those things. That makes sense? Okay.
I wasn't going to talk about specific funding. It was just a letter from a lady in Powers on how valued rural libraries are. It's just an outlook and a point of view that I think is important for us to think about.
Yes.
People don't come to very many come to Powers or Dora and don't maybe realize how much we value our little libraries and don't want to see them go away. It's a point of view. I think it's valid. I'd like to get that discussion started today. These people can be thinking maybe outside of the box about how we treat all of our libraries, the little ones especially. It's not about specific funding.
I mean, what do you think is the best way for them for to share that with the other board members?
That's a good question. You have, you
And
can.
our chair, yeah.
Yeah, you just have. Why was that?
Not really, you can chair down. Yeah.
I think it should be this meeting
Okay,
and or maybe mail that's sent out to all of us after this.
Could be sent out in the packet for the next meeting.
Yes.
yeah, if you will actually do that and forward the letter to me, then when I print out
I
the,
have it here, a copy for everybody. I could pass it out today.
Maybe at the end of the meeting, we could leave with it.
I think that's a good idea.
Then we
Instead of,
could read it and talk about it next time.
I would still recommend it go out with the packet for the
Yes.
next meeting because not everybody's here. The library directors are not here.
I can read it aloud for those who don't.
The next
have it
meeting.
in front of me.
Yes.
But we have so few meetings. That is why I wanted to start today with a frame of.
Well, so Kathy and Barbara also are for small libraries in Dora. We understand the need for libraries. Bandon, Myrtle Point, Dora, and Powers are all in the middle of nothing.
What do you mean? Nothing.
Well, there's nothing around them. People depend on the library.
That's why.
okay,
This is
so I feel like this is moving into a territory of a meeting and not a training.
It's
So-
not nothing.
I agree with Kathy. Let's at the end of the meeting, you can distribute those letters to people that are here. You can also get the letter. I'll take a copy of it. And for the packet of the next board meeting, I will include it in that. And I usually try and send that out to you guys 2 weeks in advance. So you can all get a fresh review of it then, and then they can be put onto the agenda to discuss at the actual meeting.
I would like to say that I think that's a good idea because it gives people the opportunity to study it.
Yeah, so you'll take it
Closer
today.
to the meeting when you get.
Right, you'll get it today, get it in your minds, and then, because the decisions that are made, yes, the directors are also part of this, but any decisions that are made by the board and not by the directors group. So
But you want input. from-
I want input from them. So I think giving it to them, the ones that are not here 2 weeks in advance in the packet, I think is sufficient.
If it's okay with you, I will move on to sharing my screen.
Yep.
I have a question.
Sure,
Can I ask a question?
sure. As long as it doesn't lead to a
No.
discussion of decision making.
I'm just curious if this board is supposed to know, how can I phrase it? Like, each library has so many people and supports the population.
Mhm.
And are we supposed to know, how many hours is required for each library to be open for that amount of population?
Yeah, so I can actually, I'm just gonna keep adding to my list here of things to add to this handy dandy notebook.
So is that part of our information that?
Oh, okay, so,
I'll address that.
okay, perfect.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so, today I was asked by your board chair Kathy and Stacy to, give an overview of our library district's funding and the distribution formula. They asked me to do that because I was a member of the last committee formed. We'll talk about several that were formed, over the course of the district to revise the distribution of funding among the libraries. And in my role on the committee, I was responsible for preparing a lot of the written documents that were presented to the board and to the Board of Commissioners, and so I had access to those. So we're going to go through some of that today. I also, I gave you an outline of what I'm going to talk about in my PowerPoint. And I also gave you another separate stapled packet of some supporting materials that I'll touch on. Just quickly, I'd like to go through those. There is a memo from the distribution committee dated February 21st, 2024. That was to the Coos Library Board. This is the proposal that the Coos Library Board ultimately approved and forwarded to the county commissioners. Also included in that packet is a map of our library service district and the divisions of our population service areas, followed by the actual census tracts that that map lays out. And so I wanted you to have those things. We're going to cover the material that is in this, but this is the supporting data or the supporting documentation for what I'm going to talk about today. That's my job as the librarian, is to give you information. All right, so just as an overview, the CCLSU was created by Coos County voters in 1992. We have a permanent tax base that's pretty unique in the state of Oregon. It's special. And from the point of view of a library director, I think we're really lucky to have it. The role of the Coos Library Board in this is to serve as an advisory board to the county commissioners. And one of the key responsibilities is to recommend the funding distribution formula to the commissioners. And then also we have two distinct pieces of how we're funded. We've got a funding mechanism, which is the property tax revenue that the county collects on behalf of the district that was approved by the voters. And then we have a distribution formula that determines how those funds are allocated among the libraries. Whenever I was working with the committee, one of the things that we were tasked with doing was to research the original distribution of funds at the formation of our district. And our library service district came out of an existing serial levy. And that serial levy had the majority of the libraries that are in the service district, but not all of them were a part of that serial levy. And there were a lot of politics and quite a few changes as we all here in Coos County work together to get this measure passed for our library district. And I know that many of you were here for that, and you know how much work went into the formation of this district. Once the service district was established, the libraries were guaranteed the same budgets initially that they received in 1992 and 1993. And the intention at that time was that future increases were to be distributed based on each library's share of total circulation. In other words, the approach at that time had two components. One was a base amount from the serial levy, which was primarily based in population, and then a growth amount that was based on circulation. And that method reflected the funding and the service environment when the district was created.
Was that actually written into the funding formula or the?
No,
That
no,
we
so
just
the
didn't
master
understand.
plan, the master plan does not contain a funding formula.
Okay.
That decision was made by the Coos Library Board in a meeting on May 18th, 1992.
The Coos County Commissioners,
No, the Coos Library Board,
it was advisory,
yes,
but the
and
decision,
they,
the taxing district was actually approved and voted on by the Coos County Commissioners.
no, I'm sorry, let me restate it just so that we're clear. So the taxing district was established by the voters of Coos County.
Right. Oh, I understand. That.
And
I'm just saying the final authority rests with the Coos County Commissioners on everything involving funding. We are just advisory.
the responsibility of the commissioners is to approve or deny the recommendation of the Coos
Right.
Library Board on the distribution formula. That's
Right,
correct.
they have that's when our elected officials have the final say on spending the money. We are just advisory. That's what I'm trying to understand about your
Yes.
statements about circulation numbers. Was that just an understanding? That wasn't anything written into the formula at the time?
So the Coos Library Board had official motion to make that the funding mechanism for the district, which was approved by the commissioners. The commissioners adopted that decision.
About future changes?
Let me continue on and then I think it may answer your question.
I'm
If you
trying
may-
to
if I may.
understand how this all happened. I talked to a lady who was in on the formulation of the district at the time.
Yeah.
And she said it was also consensus that every library would be funded with a full-time director. And that was
So that
a
item is
consensus
not
going forward at the time also.
in all of the research that I have done, which is reviewing the Coos Library Board minutes from prior to the passage of the measure, the legal documents from the county regarding the formation and the different roles of the parties involved, and the board meeting minutes from after the formation of the district when funding was discussed. I have not seen that requirement or
I'm not saying it
Yeah.
was in
Yeah.
writing.
Yeah.
I'm saying she
that
understood
was her recollection.
from the discussions that were had at that time that that was the intent.
Yeah.
That
Okay.
every library be funded to the extent they had a full-time library director at each library.
Yeah. So, in other words, I'm going to go back to what we were talking about, which was the original distribution. It was based on the funding and the service environment when the district was created. In 1997, Measure 47 and 50 were passed, and that changed the property tax system and effectively reduced property tax revenue available to the district. The district was no longer receiving the revenue increases that had previously allowed additional funds to be distributed through that original plan. By 1997, there was no longer a surplus of new revenue to distribute. And through Coos Library Board discussions and motions, in subsequent years, the CLB maintained the existing distribution rate rather than applying that original two-part formula in the same way, because there was no increase to divide among the libraries. And that distribution rate that developed during that period remained essentially in place through the mid-90s and for many years afterwards. So efforts to reconsider the formula started back up around 2000. In 2000, at the request of the North Bend Public Library Board, the CLB created a distribution formula committee. The committee examined and considered possible alternatives. Its 2001 report recommended using broader measures of library activity and recognized that any changes applied would need to occur over several years. Ultimately, in May of 2001, the Coos Library Board decided by consensus to leave the existing percentages in place. Based on the recommendation of the library directors, it was working satisfactorily at that time. In 2015, the Coos County Board of Commissioners asked the CLB to review the distribution formula and recommend changes. At that time, there was no formally defined formula for distributing funds among the libraries, and the existing method and percentages at that point had been in place since the mid-90s. In 2017, CLB reformed the distribution committee, and in 2018, the committee really started to do a lot of outreach and engaging directors and stakeholders in developing a revised approach. That committee worked with directors and other stakeholders to identify what a revised distribution method should accomplish. And the committee established several guiding principles. They were expected to have a funding mechanism that was clear and rational. And there was a fair and equitable distribution of funds amongst the libraries. The distribution needed to be based on verifiable current data, and they needed to create a method that was consistent and predictable over time. There was also general agreement that the formula should consider both population served and library usage rather than relying solely on population or circulation, one or the other. That it was important to consider broader usage when calculating.
What do you mean by broader usage?
So there are a number of factors that are being measured to calculate library usage. Those are circulation, circulation by borrowers from outside a library's precinct, total items checked in, library visits, and computer use.
So just the usage numbers, okay.
Instead of just circulation.
Just books or media checked out.
The various means of circulation. Okay.
Yeah, trying to hit lots of different service points. So as the committee was working, they found that an important step in developing a new formula would be to determine the population served by each library. There was not a established consistent method for doing that. The State Library of Oregon had been calculating population for our libraries for their reports. And according to their staff, their method for doing so had varied over the years, depending on their own staff. They didn't have a clear methodology for doing that. And we felt that that was not reliable or verifiable from Coos County's point of view. And also the staff at the state library agreed. They wanted us to have a more reliable and verifiable method for population served. So in 2018 and 19, the library directors worked with the state library to develop that method. The resulting service area map incorporated census data, population reports, knowledge of local usage patterns, and geographic information using a GIS mapping system. The Coos Library Board adopted the service area map on August 8, 2019, and these service areas are now used annually to calculate each library's designated service population. And this created a consistent geographic basis for including population served in a future distribution formula. And that is the map that I have enclosed, as well as the census tract sheet. Go behind it. The pandemic interrupted development of a new formula. The distribution committee resumed its work in 2021 and continued meeting through 2024. That committee was made up of myself, and 3 other Coos Library Board members. One of those members did cycle off the board, and so we ended up, Kathy, can you remind me, it was myself, you, Carol,
Linda Kirk.
and Linda Kirk.
Yeah,
Yes.
Linda Kirk was not on the board, she was just.
Oh, she was like an ex officio representative.
And then she had back surgery and she was zooming in.
Yes, okay. So throughout this process, the library directors and committee considered a wide variety of potential formulas and data points. The instructions that we were given and some notes that I have from a CLB meeting was in 2023 was to bring as many options as possible. And so that's what we did. There are dozens and dozens of iterations of a potential formula or distribution. Stakeholders were given opportunities to review proposals, provide feedback, and raise concerns. The proposal was revised multiple times as feedback was considered. Again, I want to reiterate that the broad agreement was that the new distribution considered 2 major components, population and usage. And we also were trying to avoid what I'll call major swings in the funding levels for libraries. And so as we were working through those potential outcomes and as they were being reviewed by library directors and committee members and the Coos Library Board, those were key elements of our discussion. Ultimately, the stakeholders settled on this set of usage measures, total physical circulation, digital circulation outside of the library district provided materials, outside of precinct circulation, total items checked in, library visits, and computer use. We did consider and had lots of discussion about including open hours or programming attendance, and those were considered but not included because ultimately it was determined that we could not reliably track those things and or they didn't fit our established priorities for the formula. These measures that we settled on were selected to reflect actual library use and activity. And we were looking for measures that could be applied at every library location. So I'll say like programming is another example. A larger library with a larger facility has more resources to offer more programming. That would be a self-fulfilling element. Whereas a smaller library like Dora or Powers has limited physical space to offer programming. And so it would not meet those measures or the priorities that we wanted for the formula, that it was applicable at each library in a similar way.
So Haley, can you go back to the various usage? Are those equally weighted? How are those?
They are currently equally weighted.
What do you mean by equally weighted?
So the formula that was developed combines all of those usage factors into one figure, one number that is then input into the formula. So one book checked out has the same weight as one person through the door in the current.
Okay, and those are all the funding now is based on those numbers.
No, it is not. It also includes population, which we'll get to.
So are those split equally, population and usage? Are those?
No, but if you'll allow me, I'll get to that one. Yeah, okay. Okay, so I think I wanted to share just some of the background information about the environment that we were working in and that these decisions were made in, because there were many, many discussions over many years, really, at this point, about how the library should be funded. Those discussions included consideration about how libraries across the county do not all serve our users the same way. We recognized, and these are points that came from my committee notes and reports that went to the Coos Library Board. So these are the things that the people who were working on this were thinking about as we worked through it. We recognize that larger libraries generally provide greater staffing and facilities. They support countywide programs and services. They provide the bulk of reference services. So often staff at the Coos Bay Public Library will receive phone calls from people throughout the county who have been referred to them to provide reference support. They have larger physical collections. We also valued that smaller libraries are providing local points of service. And that was the intention of our library district's master plan. When the voters formed our library district, they could have decided to do bookmobiles, but that's not what they decided. They decided to have multiple libraries throughout the county of different sizes, and they funded that. We recognize that it's important to have community access throughout the county. And it's really important to residents of Coos County to have a continuing physical library presence. They want that library building there. That's what we want, is that library in each community. And so we knew that the formula needed to recognize both the scale of service and geographic access. And so our goal was to support a countywide library system, not simply individual libraries as well, that we were trying to align ourselves with the intention of the master plan and keep that in mind as we moved forward through the process. So the result of this was the revised formula. We took a 3-year approach combining usage and population. So this is the John, this is what you were asking about. So right now, we calculate a 3-year average of each library's usage and a 3-year average of each library's population to calculate the distribution percentage. And the function of that 3-year average is to reduce the impact of unusual annual fluctuations. It also provided greater consistency and improved predictability from year to year for library budgets. We also adopted a plan that implemented this change to a new formula over the course of 3 years to allow libraries to adjust their budgets and to gradually absorb these changes in funding levels. So I know there's been some discussion about, originally there was what you could consider a base. In this revised formula, a library's population is its base funding. We didn't call it base funding whenever we put this proposal together, but effectively that's what it is a base amount of funding that is the same equitable amount across the county. A community's population is not going to drastically change from year to year or even over the course of 3 years. And even if a library had 0 people come in and 0 books checked out, according to this current formula, they would still receive some funding, a base amount of funding based on their population. And so I think it's important to recognize that that is the function that population serves in the current formula.
So how small is too small? How do you define small? Yeah, the base funding, I mean, Powers and Dora are being systematically defunded by this formula. We just cannot compete with population or usage numbers to keep up our funding. We've already lost 28% over several years. I probably will lose more. Dora doesn't even begin to have enough money to operate we cannot compete and get our tax base, our taxing district names all the libraries to be funded. It doesn't say we're just going to fund the large ones.
I
But
understand,
this formula just
I understand that it's
cuts us off at the knees.
the concern.
There's nothing fair or equitable about that as it progresses into just purely numbers translated to dollars. That's it. We cannot, do you folks know how small
I'm
schools are?
sorry to interrupt you, but I.
Do you know
think
how
that
small
at
schools are funded?
this time,
If we,
I need to bring
if
it
we
back.
use this
to
formula
the
to fund small
fair
schools,
to the
Yes.
presentation.
we wouldn't have a
Please.
school.
Okay, so I will take, I appreciate your input, but I think that that is input that needs to be directed in a board meeting to your fellow board members who have the ability to take action.
But
I
we
will
have
take
done
that.
that. I've just seen what's happened to us, and I'm here to fight for
would like
ours
to
and Dora.
share some
and I need to start
information
talking about it so people
about-
understand.
So
How
this
important
is
it is.
really, I don't even understand all this, and I've been on the board. for
I have
3
been
years.
looking at it. I have been looking at it, and I actually could,
If
you can use a
have
weighted formula for it. I mean, I have
question
solutions to this.
about.
I'm not just complaining.
Yeah, but
And I
think
know
the
we're not
point is
making
that this
decisions
is not the
today.
venue.
So I'm enjoying, Haley going through all this. I lived part of this, but it's nice to review it. And Haley does a great job of explaining all of this, and
And if you have
that's
specific.
why we held this meeting, this, training. So the new people could understand,
Well, I'm a new
how we
person.
got here.
I'm a new person.
I know
And I'm
you
trying
are.
to understand it. I'm trying to get you to
At
understand
least wait,
why.
at least wait till the end of, this workshop to start talking about other things, please.
I think I understand your concern. I know you talked to one of our board meetings. But I do think the purpose is probably, particularly for newer members, is to go over how we got to the place where we got as far as funding is concerned. So asking questions about the funding formula and how we got there is fine. But the difficulty starts to be is this can't be considered a public meeting. If it was a public meeting, we'd have to have an agenda like 48 hours before it. The public would be able to come and make public comments. There's a lot of requirements. In other words, you can't make decisions and you really can't discuss stuff. Wait a second. What you're doing is, however, you're interjecting the reason why you think some of the stuff in the formula is wrong. I get that. But I think the purpose of this meeting is just to describe the current formula in the way that it is. And then at the board meeting, you bring up, now that you have the background, since you're new, of how this funding occurred, then you have the opportunity to come to that board meeting and say, okay, I attained the training, I understand how you came up with the funding, and here's why I think it's flawed.
And as a new member also, I'd like to have this background as my historical base and understanding before I can really hear some of the different discussions around some of the issues and what that would mean in rolling out whatever decision we make as a board. That would be best for the whole area. That's my feeling, is I really appreciate the training aspect of this. So that I can move forward to my best ability. I just need to say.
Haley was gracious enough to take this on, a workshop, and this part of the workshop to explain the formula, because it isn't easy. And, I enjoyed the, hearing about since the 1990s. I mean, this hasn't, just started.
Right.
And it's not finished.
I brought up some points of view from that era as well.
So we'll let Haley continue with her talk, so she doesn't lose her train of thought.
Thank you, everyone. And if there are specific questions about the elements of the formula or, I think a good example that I'll use, that it's information would be good to share with you. So, we chose this 75 to 25% split. The rationale behind that was really based in working through the numbers and the effects of different percentages on library funding. If we had weighted population more heavily, we would have seen larger swings, as I said earlier, in the change in how libraries were funded. It would have been a greater percentage of funding lost or gained by individual libraries. This percentage split, 75% usage, weighing things more heavily on the end of the services that the libraries were providing, minimized the impact of this formula change on the funding that the library was currently receiving. And that was an articulated goal of the Coos Library Board.
So Haley, on the population estimates, where's that coming from, and is that done annually? Because the census is only 10 years.
Yeah. So, as was included, we did use a visual map, but we also used GIS mapping to, break that down to census tracts. And that calculation is done annually by staff at the State Library of Oregon. And they rely on data that is produced by Portland State University. And PSU is considered the authority in the state of Oregon on population calculations. All of the state agencies use the data from PSU. And so within our state, that is considered the most reliable source for up-to-date population information. Any other questions before I move on? Okay, so in December of 2023, the distribution committee presented its final recommendations to the CLB, and the Coos Library Board directed the county's library directors to take the proposed formula to their local stakeholders and library boards for review. So, for example, I'll use myself. That meant that I took it to the North Bend Public Library Board. They reviewed it, and they actually made a formal motion on how they would recommend the Coos Library Board handle it. They approved it, if you will, as the North Bend Board. Their recommendation was that the Coos Library Board proceed. So each library director went through that process with their own stakeholders. And it was, the responsibility of the director to manage that. Feedback was collected and we made several adjustments. I remember distinctly that there were some adjustments made to how we were calculating attendance. And attendance at library programs. So we did make some adjustments during that interim period. And then ultimately in February of 2024, the Coos Library Board unanimously voted with the board members present at that meeting to recommend that the county commissioners approve the revised distribution formula in their role as the governing body. So then the formula was forwarded to the county commissioners, and they received public testimony on the subject. Barbara spoke on behalf of the board and the committee. Library directors spoke. People from different communities spoke and shared their input on the revisions to the formula, and ultimately the county commissioners decided to move forward with adopting the revision to the formula and to use that new formula to calculate the distribution of funds moving forward. We do have a phased in calculation. So we are currently in year 3 of that transition. So in the first year of the new formula, libraries received 75% of their old percentage of funds and 25% based on the new calculation. The second year, it was 50-50, old formula, new formula. And then in the current year, we're in year 3, we're receiving 25% of our funding based on our old percentages and 75% on the new calculation. I think some other key takeaways to keep in mind is that measures 47 and 50 have really changed how property taxes are collected and the revenue available to public agencies, libraries included, in the state. And ultimately, it's not kept pace with increasing operating costs and expenses. So that is important to keep in mind. Library populations, service areas, and usage have changed since the formation of the district in 1992, which is what kind of was the inciting factors for the revision of the formula. Our revised approach is based on data, and steps were taken to make it as predictable as possible, because governmental budgets take a long time to produce. And so typically a library will begin working on their budget for the upcoming year in December at the late, December, January. We're already working on those items for our local governments, our cities. We are using 3-year averages to help level out any unusual fluctuations. And the goal of the process was a sustainable approach for our countywide library district. It was a multi-year effort, and we tried throughout to be consistent, transparent, and to have a defensible method for allocating our district resources. That was the direction that we were given by the county commissioners and the Coos Library Board and all of our stakeholders. And so this is the process that we went through to accomplish that, and what our current distribution method is.
So briefly question, and you probably hit it and I didn't catch it, but there's also sort of a look back ability for libraries that have had some major event. And I'm going to use the Merleton Library because I have some knowledge there. They were closed for several months when they had their remodels. And the library director, current library director, came to this board and was able to ask that had that year or partial year or something not be totally included in the plan. So if there's some disaster or major event happening, that there is sort of a safety net in them.
In the distribution committee report that I provided to you on page 4, there's a section titled Interruptions in Library Service, and that addresses those facility closures that you're talking about, Barbara.
Haley, you've had on an early slide the guiding principles, and I don't know if these factored.
It should be in the overview document that I provided to you in the other packet. I think on page 3.
Page 3.
You can see it like in front of
It doesn't- it doesn't have the page number.
Yes, page 3. Yeah, mine didn't have page numbers.
Thank you.
You needed the website. Steven.
You do.
Yeah, is there any requirement when we originally established this funding that Coos County Library Board look at it at some time period and decide whether or not there needed to be any adjustments or changes to it?
And I think at the beginning of the last revision, probably in 2017. I could look up the exact meeting because I did see it just recently. There was no official movement or requirement to do that. The intention through discussion was to do it every 5 years. But it was not, made as an official motion. If you look at, on page 2 of the distribution committee report, there's a timeline. And, the formula and distribution method was taken to the commissioners in March of 2024. And they reviewed it, and there was disagreement within the library community about whether or not this was the right method. And some library stakeholders went outside of the process, the Coos Library Board process. And there was kind of a tangent that we went on as to whether we were going to work with a consultant perhaps to assess this issue. And that tangent, this is my point of view as a library director and as someone who was involved in the process, was that it got us off track. Because we had laid out a timeline, and after the Board of Commissioners adopted the recommendations and the new formula mechanism, we did not continue along that timeline. And I think it was because during that adoption process, we went on some side discussions, and there were some other things that were not necessarily expected by the board that happened. And so the board has not returned to this timeline. And part of that timeline, one of those items on that timeline, was to approve review procedures for the distribution process. So that has not been set by the board.
But this indicates that it's Coos Library Board approves review procedures for distribution process in April of 2024.
Yes, and if you'll see in the first status column, that is what.
That was
the desired.
Yeah, that was our original timeline on when we would like to have seen that done, or the committee the board would have liked the committee to have it completed.
Okay.
And then it was a pretty long,
Yes.
almost year-long tangent.
And what happened during that time was that we were given different direction from the Board of Commissioners. And that's all documented through your board meeting minutes and the Board of Commissioners meeting minutes. But
And the county commissioners minutes as well.
Yes.
They had a work session. I attended that one.
yes,
There was some concern about population from Cook Hill specifically.
yes.
And I was at the meeting when the Copial contingent was there. I spoke on behalf of Powers.
Yeah.
We have always opposed this funding formula, knowing what it was going to do to us.
Christine asked a question in the chat about was the library consultant report mentioned. I came in late. Christine, that's actually what we're talking about now, was about the timeline that the Coos Library Board had initially set, and how when the matter was taken before the Board of Commissioners, we ended up on I'll call it a sidetrack, because it was something that was not originally anticipated with consideration of using a library consultant. And if any of you would like to review those documents, I'm sure Stacy can provide you with access to those.
Yeah, basically the consultant that we ended up contracting with, he took a look at, I sent him all of the documentation. I sent him the old formula, it wasn't a formula, the old percentages. And then basically everything that we had done, that the committee had done. I sent him all those documents and he reviewed them all. And went in and, looked at a bunch of different scenarios, different formulas that that had come up during the process, different iterations of it. And his, with a couple of minor things that he would have recommended changes on, was in agreement that this current formula was the one that supported the libraries and that would evolve over time with the growth of individual libraries. I'm trying to remember the two changes that he wanted, that his recommendations were to add. I want to say one was programming and the other was open hours were the two things. And when I brought that report to this board, they, with the recommendation of the directors who didn't see that those two options would have been in line with what we were trying to do, decided not to follow those two recommendations. But his overall recommendation was that we should move forward with what we had. I do have all of those reports. I can email them out to everybody so that you guys do have those, the report from the consultant.
I do have a question. Didn't the county commissioners approve a 3-year plan? And we are in the 3rd year of that.
The commissioners approved what was presented to them, which was, yes, part of that, a 3-year transition plan. But there was no requirement placed, to my knowledge, by the commissioners to make any further revisions to the distribution method.
No, they made one comment in the last meeting I had with them when we were again discussing population and how the numbers were figured by the state library. I explained to them that the numbers, they came from PSU. They were in reference to the map that we had created, the tracks that we had created, and they gave, and it wasn't a motion, no time frame, just that in the future, it would be a good idea to look at population again. And that's pretty much, it was very informal, was their recommendation.
Are you folks even open to talking about a review of the current?
So I think that is a board action. So that would be something that you would just go through the channels of the board and ask for Stacy to place that on a future agenda item. And then, or work with Stacy and the board chair to make that a future agenda item. I'm not exactly sure what the bylaws for the board say about placing items on the agenda, but I know there's a mechanism for it. So you would just work with.
That one of our main purposes is the budgeting.
Yes.
So wouldn't we be looking at it? So obviously it's my intent to bring it up and talk about it and suggest some changes.
Yeah.
So if that's the process, then I'd appreciate at whatever meeting this is acceptable.
Sure.
Put it on the agenda.
Okay, so kind of going back to the fact that we are still in the transition, we are not functioning yet on the new formula. We're functioning on a portion of the new formula and a portion of the old formula. So starting next fiscal year, we'll be 100% into the new formula. And
Are you locked into that?
Yeah.
I mean,
It's not fair to not follow it through.
I'm gonna interrupt again and say, I think this is the discussion. And so I think, we can answer the question of a 3-year transition plan was approved.
yes,
And it was approved by the county commissioners.
Right.
If
And
the
the
Coos
formula was
like,
approved by the county commission.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I would amend it to not saying they didn't approve
Yes.
the 3-year plan, but they approved was a funding method for the library district. And inside that funding method, they came up with a new formula for distributing funds and the fact that they would implement that new funding formula over a 3-year period. So they approved an entire funding plan.
correct.
And those were just the 3-year thing, and the formula were elements of that funding.
Correct.
thank you for that clarification.
Yes.
So, the Coos Library Board is an advisory board to the county commissioners. Governmentally, the board could decide as a body to ask for the commissioners to look at it again. They could ask for a revision. They could propose a revision. They could do those things. But it is an action that has to be taken by that body, by your board as a whole. And so that's where we get into that, like, put it on the agenda. Just, make a proposal, have some discussion, take a vote. Those are the actions that are required to do that.
So is there a work plan out here for the board that says draft ongoing review procedures for new distribution process?
To make that happen, the Coos Library Board would probably, my recommendation would be for the board to reform the committee, if they want a committee to do that, to reform the committee and to give that committee direction to do those things, to produce those items. I think that would be the most appropriate and also most transparent, clearest way to do that would be for the board to reform the committee to do that work.
And am I correct too, that when we work with this formula, it's actually a retrospective formula? Because we're using data from the state library reports, but because of when it closes, when we're looking at, you know what I'm trying to say, but I'm not doing a very good job of it.
Yeah. In plain language, there's a gap here. So the state library report is published usually in January or February. And so by January or February, we are already into the budget making process. So we are looking backwards for the data. In the current year, Stacy's going to look up which statistical years it is. One second, I will find it. Oh. Well, I can say that in the first year, which was fiscal year June 1st through July 25th, we used data from 2019 to 2022.
Now it would be 2024, 2022 to 2024.
I will have it. Sorry, I'm trying. He's working with the mouse and three screens, so. Here we go. We looked at years. Correct, so it would have been fiscal year 22, 23, and 24. That's correct, yeah.
And I have a question about process. So you can educate me. I obviously have some suggestions I want to make about funding. And we put it on the agenda at an appropriate time. And if miracles were to happen and everybody said, oh, that's a good idea, could we just vote on it and make that recommendation to the budgeting process? And is that a process that could work?
That is a simplification, but yes, I think so. I think what you're describing could happen. So let me repeat it back to you. So if the Coos Library Board decided to have a different formula, a different funding mechanism,
Just some changes,
some change,
not necessarily a different formula, actually. I have ideas that wouldn't be detrimental, I don't think, to anybody, but would help us.
So some changes. The board has the annual task of recommending a formula to the county commissioners. So they could, in any fiscal year, make a recommendation to the commissioners for a different type of formula or a different version of the formula. They could use that.
Which, I mean, per Haley slides. That's what happened in the past.
Yeah.
At one point, the North Bend Library Board or City Council, one of the two, recommended that it be looked at. And then at one point, the BOC actually said, hey, can you guys look at that? So, I mean, I think theoretically, the suggestion could come from wherever. It would just then become a board discussion that would end up in a motion and a vote for reconsideration.
You talked about having to form a committee. It just seems like the budget process, people need to know how to put their numbers together. Has happened sooner than later. That's why I'm trying to start the process, at least in a different way of thinking.
Yes.
Yeah, I get a little bit off subject and hopefully not into trouble. Is that and you can cut me off, the bylaws, our bylaws don't require anything as far as the agenda is concerned for meetings. Instead, they reference Oregon public meeting rules. And Oregon public meeting rules require that you give public notice at least 48 hours before the meeting. And one of the requirements not only is the time and place of the meeting, but it's a list of the principal subjects that are anticipated to be discussed. And then so the public has a pretty good idea to do that. So just again, we're not making any decisions, but if those kinds of topics want to come up at the next regular scheduled meeting, they should be on the agenda so that the public would know that and have notice.
And personally, do we have an option to have that notice earlier than 48 hours?
You do.
Because as a public.
I tried to get it
Person, I'd like to receive it a little earlier
Yeah.
than 48 hours.
No, for sure. And I try to send it out at least 2 weeks in advance. I don't want to send it out too far in advance because then it's removed from your mind by the time you get there. But I try to send everything out, and post everything publicly, 2 weeks prior. I've found in the past that kind of gives that in between of you have enough time to study it, but you don't have enough time to forget it. So yeah, 2 weeks is generally.
Yeah, I think the public meeting law says reasonably calculated, but not less than 48 hours.
Right.
Where do you post? Where are the public?
So, they're posted on the cooslibraries.org website, the announcements there. It lists the date, the time. It will have a copy of the agenda on there that you can click on and open. It has the YouTube link for the video to watch the video or to attend. Not necessarily watch it live, sorry. It goes there. I send all of that out to the directors so that if they have websites they want to post it on there, they can. They can display it any way they want. And then we send it out to our media list. So, which is, I honestly couldn't tell you right now because it's in my email. I just have a list that I send it out to, but any media outlet. So radio stations, television, written, any media outlet like that.
So all libraries could print it and then post it.
Absolutely.
On a
Yeah.
Is there a date for the November meeting?
There is not. I will go ahead, what are we in August now? I will go ahead and when I get within the next week or so, I generally send out a survey like I did for this one with an option of dates and times to all you guys. And then this is how we, over trial and error, this is how I found it the best way to get as many of you here as possible. And then once that establishes a date, then I'll go ahead and send you guys all an invite to the meeting through your library emails. But yeah, I can go ahead and start working on that so that we can have something on the books.
Would it be possible for you to have at least one of the meetings in Coquille?
I'll have to discuss it with Teresa. They have to be, I don't think she has an owl.
She does.
She does have one. Okay, so yes, technically I can have the meetings wherever there is a way for us to stream it.
It's just
So
saves drive time
for sure, no, it's definitely a lot more centrally located, and Coos Bay has always been, Coos Bay and North Bend were the original ones that got the owls, so those two were the most, and they had the most space, but with Coquille's new meeting room, it's large enough for us. So yeah, I will work with her on, actually, we might be able to do that next one in Coquille, but I'll discuss it with Teresa, make sure that she has the time available and all of the equipment that I need in order to have it go. Anything else?
May I distribute my letter?
Yeah, I think
The last thing I'll say in conclusion is that this is a fraction of the documentation that we have on this topic. And so if you have further questions or you read something in this and you'd like to know more about a particular element of this process, please reach out to me. I would be happy to help you find that information. I'm sure that what I have is not exhaustive, but I have both digital copies of meeting minutes and notes, and I have 3 folders that are each about this thick in my office of notes and meeting information on this topic. So, please let me know.
I had asked a question at the beginning and you said it would be covered and
Please
I
ask me again.
didn't hear it. I said, is it the purpose of us, this board, the CLB, to know the facts of each library, how many hours they have to be open,
Yes, okay.
to the population and
Yeah.
what's the minimum requirements, that kind of stuff.
it is on the state library.
What you're looking for is the Oregon Revised Statutes, official recognition of public libraries.
Okay, and that's in our book.
It's not in there, but I will add it.
Oh, okay, okay.
And that,
Do you know it by heart?
I know that our libraries far exceed the minimum conditions. We do not have any libraries that are anywhere close to not meeting the minimum conditions. And at one point, kind of late in the funding discussion, there was a question about minimum conditions and should we base our funding on those? And when we looked at those minimum conditions, we were so far and above what those are, it didn't make logical sense to try to base something that we're doing here in Coos County on those statistics or on that version of statistics or that type of statute. The state for our service populations, it does address like full-time staff versus part-time staff, and we are exceeding those requirements.
Okay.
I do,
So even Dora and Alex.
Yes,
I do,
and Lakeside.
yeah, one of the figures is open hours, and I know this one off the top of my head because I was just looking it up. Any library over, so minimum functional to meet state guidelines. Any library over 2,000 in population for that service area is 20 hours minimum of library hours, and under 2,000 population is 10 hours of operation in a week. So like Haley had said, that's unacceptable as far as what the way we see are the function of our county. So they are there as a guideline, but I actually went in and per all of their regulations, completed a formula, and it was the amount of funding that it was so low for small libraries, and it was completely unrealistic. So we kind of moved away from.
Think about, like, when we're talking about these things, to not think about like unrealistic or, but like, it was not the direction we wanted to go in. It was not the direction that the board wanted to go in. There are libraries in the state of Oregon who operate that way, and that's the service that their community gets, but it's not the direction
That this
group
county
wanted to go to.
This letter I just gave you was written by a young lady in Powell. She was born and raised there, raising her own family there. She puts into words what I've been trying to convey to you a whole lot better than I've been able to say it. Shouldn't make anybody mad. It just maybe you'll see through her eyes how we value what we have and don't want to lose it. So if I.
So we'll bring it to the meeting and we'll discuss it.
Yeah.
And I've written you know, that you want to talk in 3 minutes. And if Stacy doesn't remember, I'll remind you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for your understanding about the restrictions of public meetings and those sorts of things. I know they can be tricky to navigate sometimes, and I know, you know, this is me as North Bend Library Director. I know through my time here in this area that everyone is passionate about both the libraries that they use every day, but also about being able to work together to keep this good thing that we have, this library service district. And I appreciate everybody here, your volunteers. I appreciate your time. And thank you for the effort that you're putting into this.
Can I say
It's really
something?
important.
A lot of people, through the years, even before 1992, struggled and worked and bickered back and forth to get this, these libraries as a district. Judy Roman said, no library in this county will ever fail. And when you witnessed a few years ago, Roseburg Library shut down, Ashland.
Reedsport.
Yes, so we are really doing a service to have many people have formed this district. And so it's nice that it will continue.
I would like to agree with that. The district is the key here.
Yes.
Because those serial levies had to be voted on by the public every 3 years. And there was always the potential that some year that would fail. So this district is stable funding for the libraries.
No matter, you know, what the bottom line is.
When is the expiration date for the district? That does at some point need to be, no?
It is a permanent tax base.
Okay.
And we are still subject to the actions of the voters,
So they can remove it, but they don't have to.
but we have a permanently established tax base.
And that was the difficulty with the serial notice. Because it was every few years, you know, I had to do it. And it really screwed up planning and stability.
Well, thank you, Haley, so much for explaining all that.
All right.
See everybody too,
Going to officially end.
and to meet new people.
And you all have my email, so if you ever have any questions, need anything, email me.